In 800 years, not a single English king has been named John. Think about that for a moment. Edwards, Richards, Henrys, Georges, Williams, but never John, not once. And the reason lies dying right now, in October 1216, in a castle in Nottinghamshire. A 49-year-old king lies on a sweat-soaked bed, his body being torn apart from the inside by dysentery, his treasure lost to the sea, his kingdom half occupied by a French invasion force, his barons in open rebellion, and his legacy so completely destroyed that his very name will become a curse for the English monarchy. 3 days ago, he watched his crown jewels disappear into the quicksand of a tidal estuary. 3 years ago, he was forced to seal a document limiting his own power at sword point. 12 years ago, he murdered his teenage nephew according to multiple contemporary chroniclers with his own hands during a drunken rage. King John didn't just fail. He failed so spectacularly, so comprehensively, in so many different ways, that medieval writers perfectly accustomed to brutal kings struggled to find words adequate to describe their horror. One contemporary chronicler who had actually fought on John's side wrote that he was brimful of evil qualities. Another imagined Satan himself recoiling from John's arrival in hell, declaring that even the underworld was made fouler by his presence. But here's what makes John's story more than just a catalogue of medieval cruelty. The document he was forced to seal at sword point became the foundation of constitutional democracy. The rebellion that destroyed him established the principle that no ruler stands above the law. John's catastrophic failure created something far greater than anything he achieved in his actual reign. This is how England's most hated king destroyed himself and accidentally created modern liberty. When John became King of England in May 1199, he inherited one of medieval Europe's greatest territorial complexes. Historians call it the Angevin Empire. Picture a domain stretching from the Scottish border to the Pyrenees Mountains, England, Normandy, Anjou, Maine, Poitou, Aquitaine, Brittany. More than half of modern France was ruled from London. John's father, Henry II, had built this empire through inheritance, marriage, and relentless military expansion. John's brother, Richard the Lionheart, had maintained it through sheer force of personality and martial prowess. Now it was John's turn. He was 32 years old, the youngest son who had spent his entire life, never expected to rule, nicknamed Lachlan because his father had given all the good territories to his older brothers. Now suddenly he had everything. Within 5 years he would lose almost all of it. The collapse began with a wedding. In August 1200, John married Isabella of Angoulême. She was young, beautiful, and already betrothed to someone else, Eudes Lusignan, an influential baron in Aquitaine. When John saw Isabella, he simply took her for himself, apparently unconcerned about the political consequences. The enraged Lusignans appealed to King Philip Augustus of France, who saw an opportunity he'd been waiting for. John technically held his French territories as a vassal of the French crown. Philip summoned John to Paris to answer for the offense. John refused to appear. In medieval feudal law, this was catastrophic. A vassal who refused his lord's summons could be declared in default, his lands forfeit. Philip now had legal justification to seize everything John held in France, and he had something else, a better candidate for John's throne. Arthur of Brittany was 12 years old in 1200. He was also John's nephew, the son of John's older brother Geoffrey, who had died before their father. By strict rules of primogeniture, Arthur arguably had a better claim to the throne than John did. He was the son of an older brother, while John was the youngest son. This made Arthur extraordinarily dangerous. Philip Augustus recognized it immediately, providing the boy with military support and treating him as the rightful heir. John's response to this existential threat would define everything that followed. In August 1202, John achieved what should have been the decisive victory of the war. Acting with surprising speed, he executed a lightning strike against the rebel coalition at Mirabeau. The rebels were caught completely unprepared. In a single engagement, John captured Arthur along with over 200 enemy knights. The victory should have ended the threat permanently. John had his rival in custody. He could have ransomed them, negotiated from strength, consolidated his position. Instead, he made a decision that would haunt medieval memory for generations. Arthur was now 16, old enough to be a credible rival, old enough to attract supporters, old enough to be dangerous for as long as he lived. Contemporary chroniclers recorded what happened next, though they disagreed on exact details. Some said John personally murdered Arthur during a drunken rage, beating his nephew to death with his own hands. Others blamed John's lieutenant, William de Braose, acting on royal orders. They recognized something fundamental: their lands and families were safer with a predictable enemy than an unpredictable ally. Between 1202 and 1204, the Angevin Empire collapsed with stunning speed. Anjou fell in 1202. Normandy, the territory English kings had held since William the Conqueror surrendered to Philip in 1204. By 1206, John had lost Anjou-Maine, most of Poitou and Brittany. Only Gascony and fragments of Aquitaine remained. Less than a quarter of what he had inherited. His reputation among French nobility was captured in a new nickname that spread across the courts. Softword stripped of his continental ambitions. John turned his frustrated energy inward. What followed transformed England into what one modern historian calls a merciless tyranny. Unable to reconquer his lost lands through military skill, John decided to fund a reconquest through the most intensive financial exploitation in English history. The numbers tell the story. Royal income at the start of John's reign, approximately £25,000 per year. Royal income at its peak in 1211, £145,000. A six-fold increase driven entirely by aggressive extraction rather than genuine economic growth. Scutage of feudal tax paid by barons in lieu of military service was levied 3 times under Richard. Under John, it was levied 11 times. What should have been an occasional feudal obligation became a regular tax. John exploited every feudal incident, every wardship, every marriage right, every inheritance relief with merciless efficiency. Justice itself became a commodity. John's courts functioned as cash extraction machines rather than institutions of justice. To understand what made John's regime genuinely terrifying, consider what happened to the de Braose family. Contemporary chroniclers described what was found when the cell was finally opened. Matilda's body showed signs that in her final extremity she had gnawed at her own son's cheeks. When John's attempt to reconquer Normandy ended in complete failure at the Battle of Bouvines, where John, true to character, retreated before the fighting even reached him, the barons refused to pay any more scutage. In May 1215, rebel barons raised an army and took London. With the capital in their hands, John was cornered. Most radically, it established that the law was a force in itself, that even the king was bound by law rather than standing above it. John probably never intended to honor a single word. Within weeks, he secretly requested that Pope Innocent III annul the charter. The Pope obliged, declaring Magna Carta illegal and unjust. By September, king and barons were at war again. In spring 1216, the rebel barons made a devastating decision. They invited Prince Louis of France to come to England and claim the throne. In May 1216, a French army landed in Kent. John watched his kingdom slip away. By October, ravaged by dysentery, having lost his treasure crossing the Wash estuary, John died at Newark Castle on October 18, 1216. King John's catastrophic failure created something far greater than anything he achieved, the idea that power must be limited by law. 800 years later, no English king has borne his name, but his accidental legacy lives on in every democracy that places law above the will of any single ruler.